This is a tribute to Terry. Terry was my cousin, and I first met him when I was visiting my hometown of Birmingham, Alabama. And Terry had married into the family. He married my cousin Stephanie. My my cousins from that family, my aunt and uncle Susan and Rick, because Susan and I were so close in age, really I they called me Uncle Mike, and I considered them my nieces and nephews, but actually they were my cousins. Anyway, Terry married Stephanie, one of my cousins, and I was privileged to spend some time with him. It was early in their marriage, and he was just a sponge. He'd gone through so much. His um, his parents had both burned alive in their home. He had a medical problem at a very young age that could have been life-threatening, and he had overcome that. And he married Stephanie, who is a delightful, lovely, uh, sweet person. Anyway, so they moved on, and I spent time with Terry from time to time. And as I said earlier, he was kind of like a sponge. He was wanting to learn. He was wanting to grow. He was needing parental figures in his life because his own parents were gone, long gone, and he and his brother had pretty much raised themselves. Anyway, Terry um, and Steph had two daughters, Kelsey and Brianna, lovely girls. Their mother was lovely, and the girls favor her quite a bit. And of course, they were the apple of Terry's eye. And they grew and established their home. Terry grew in his vocational pursuits and was doing well. They bought a home in Hartselle, Alabama, and life was going well, except Stephanie started noticing that she was bruising in an unusual way. And medical tests followed, and the the diagnosis was not good. She had uh, the most difficult and most aggressive form of leukemia. And that began, of course, a long, long series of medical treatments and ups and downs. And, they would have to go in every few days to have a platelet infusion because she was not doing well. And ultimately, what happened was they finally got to the stage where she could get a bone marrow transplant. No family members were found to donate the bone marrow, so she uh, they managed through a bone marrow bank. They found a donor that was the next best thing to an actual relative. And anyway, um, she went through the bone marrow transplant, and of course that process is a grueling one. They have chemotherapy repeatedly to kind of kill off a person's own uh, bone marrow, and it wipes out um, your immune system. So she was very fragile, and I remember when she was getting ready for her bone marrow transplant. I was living in Arizona, and of course, she was back in Alabama, but she had gone to Vanderbilt Medical Center and was staying there to be prepped for her bone marrow transplant. So I had some things that took me back to Alabama coincidentally, but not really. It was God's grace, I think, to get to spend time together. I flew out there and visited the family in Alabama, and I went to Vanderbilt in Nashville to spend some time with Steph. And, throughout her whole experience of dealing with all of these medical problems and uh, the pain and the discomfort and the terrible side effects of chemotherapy, she maintained a wonderful, kind, optimistic demeanor, attitude. Anyway, so she had the bone marrow transplant. We were all very hopeful, of course, that there would be a good outcome. But it soon became pretty obvious that the bone marrow transplant had failed. And really, at that stage, it was pretty much the recollect or the recognition that she was terminal, and that would not turn out well. So you have a young family, two young girls in adolescence, and Terry, a hardworking guy who had to be on the road a lot, driving trucks. And it was a heartbreaking scenario, and the girls were really beginning to show some crumbling emotionally. They were angry and they didn't understand what was happening to them, to their mom. You know, they lashed out in seeming rebellious ways, but actually they were just crying out in pain. So, fast forward several months, and I was able to go back to Alabama and visit Stephanie and the girls and Terry in Alabama, and she was in final stages of her disease. She was taking prednisone as part of her treatment, and she was swollen and just looked uh, so bad. And she had been a gorgeous young lady, and she had unfortunately been ravaged by the disease and not able to maintain that aspect of herself. But Terry and the girls, even though they were going through a lot of trauma, they, of course, rallied around her. Sometimes it was turbulent, especially with the girls, but um, they were fiercely loyal to each other and loved each other. And Terry continually laid down his life for Steph and for the girls, and it was a very, very rough, very rough time. Anyway, um, fast forward, I remember getting a phone call in, I can't even remember what month it was. It was a phone call from Stephanie. Somebody had actually placed a call for her, and she could not really speak, but she could make sounds. And I prayed for her and encouraged her and told her that I was looking forward to the time that we would see each other again, and knowing that this might be the last time I spoke with her. Anyway, she Um, After I prayed, she made a little high pitched sound, which kind of indicated her love, her appreciation of the prayer and the sharing that I was able to do with her. And the next day she was gone. She went home to be with the Lord. And of course, that left behind a devastated Terry and the girls. Fast forward, the girls grew, went to school, became even more gorgeous, very much reminiscent of their mom. And they met boys who were men, and then they were married and having babies of their own. All this while, Terry never remarried. He always kept Stephanie in his heart as his one true love. So he was so devoted and was an example of everything that a husband should be to someone he loved. And he also encountered some health issues along the way. He had developed um, bladder cancer, which they were able to catch pretty early and treat him with chemotherapy. And he would have to periodically go in to um, get renewed treatments of the chemo. They would place it into the bladder to help kill the cancer cells. And so he was doing pretty well. And I stopped by to see him. My father had passed away, and I took his ashes back to do a little a memorial and to sprinkle his ashes in his hometown of Nauvoo. And I was able during that trip to go and visit Terry, spend a few hours with him, and you know, he was tired, but pleasant, and we had a wonderful time of catch up. And we had always sent messages back and forth to each other on Facebook, uh, expressing our love and support for each other. Well, as happens, sometimes we lose track of people, and I got tied up with so many things in my own life and didn't get to make connection with him as I should have. Should have. I mean, we do what we can do, and we do sometimes less than what we should do, but anyway. So I got an email from my nephew, my cousin, who's like my nephew, telling me that Terry was dying, that he was near death and he was unresponsive and breathing was shallow, and he was going to be going home very, very shortly. And I wanted to try to get out there, but then I realized that if he was unresponsive, I mean, my being there wasn't going to do any good for him. And the last time I'd seen him, he was in good shape. Well, he had cancer, but it was well under control. Well, apparently, I didn't realize it that he had developed pancreatic cancer, which, as you may or may not know, is a deadly, aggressive type of cancer, which is not usually survivable, and the prognosis is very, very short. in terms of how long a person can live with it. There's a procedure called the Whipple procedure that is not something that everybody with pancreatic cancer can have, but Terry opted to have that, and the doctors determined that he was a candidate for it. So anyway, he had the Whipple procedure, and it bought him a little bit of time, about a year. And Lord only knows, I don't know how his quality of life was during that year, but uh, ours is not to reason why or to second guess these things. God was on the throne, and God took care of Terry, and God took Terry home a couple of days ago. So you may be wondering, why in the world are you recording this? And I guess I would just say that Terry was a godly man, not a perfect man. He was rough around the edges, but he had a heart as big as a football field, and he loved me, he loved our family, he loved his girls, and of course his Stephanie, with whom he's now reunited, which is a real blessing. I just wanted to pay tribute to Terry because I feel like he was um, every man, not a celebrity, not a person who was rich or overly talented. He lived on very simple means. He loved in very simple but heartfelt ways. And his legacy is two beautiful daughters, sons-in-law, grandchildren, all of whom love him and miss him a whole lot. So, this is just a tribute to Terry.